Hispanic lives matter, European lives, everybody, Asian lives matter. And I think the fact that it has to be stated that any one particular group matters should speak volumes about the state of affairs in a particular society, whether it's a nation, a world, a village. Um, if anybody has to say, wait a second, I matter too, it means that something is fundamentally not quite right. And with that in mind, I thought that the lives of these millions of undefended civilian workers, or civilians turned forced workers, because that's important, mattered and still matters, and that we need to do a better job in society to to show that they mattered. When you have such an enormously large group of individuals, they were not a monolith. They were individuals with their own lives, their own minds, their own intellect, their own bodies, their own eyes, their own hearts, their own dreams. And you're not talking about 100 people. You're not talking about 1,000. You're not even talking about 10,000 people. And 1,000 people, 10,000 people is a significant number of people. One person, really, for this kind of wrong, where you basically despeciate someone from the very species they were born in naturally, where you arbitrarily and extrajudicially place that person in a prison situation, a prison life. You imprison them. They're not free to leave. And they've done nothing wrong at all. They've done nothing wrong. You just arbitrarily, capriciously, and by fiat, you take someone's liberty completely. You force them to work for their entire lives. Each of these individuals, you're talking about 17 million, approximately 17 million individuals. These were not a monolith. You force them to work for their entire lives without even $1 of pay, well, not even a dollar, for an entire lifetime of pay, for a cumulative 244 years. And then once you being whoever did it, whoever is guilty, right? Once you were finished with them, you'd had your fill, you had achieved all of your objectives or close to all of your objectives, you tossed them into the streets and you said you're free to go, right? And not a word of apology, no recognition of accountability, of responsibility, no sympathy, nothing. You're free to leave, and if you don't like it here, you can just go back to wherever your original ancestors came from 244 years ago, because we're done with you. um, I don't think that is the way to, oops, did I just flash you? Sorry, oh my gosh, I need a pen. I don't think that's the way to show someone that they matter. And it didn't stop there, did it? I mean, after these people were set free, then you still have 150 years later, all of the ramifications, all of the repercussions, all of the lingering effects still affecting their family members, their relatives, their descendants to this day, whether it's discrimination, exclusion, or the results of the economic blitzkrieg that I've always referenced, as we've spoken about this over the course of a few weeks now. The economic blitzkrieg, the cratering of people economically, when you basically steal their wages for their entire working lives. It wasn't for 1 year, it wasn't for 2 years, it wasn't for 5, it wasn't for 10, it wasn't for 15, it was for their entire working lives. You take all their money, of course, that is going to have an impact on that individual's life, and it's going to have an impact on the society and the community in which that individual resides. And so collectively and individually, this was an economic blitzkrieg that was unleashed on innocent civilians who had done nothing wrong, who had not been adjudicated as having done something wrong. I think that the very least that these powerful governments, in particular the United States and England, who are the subjects in my book, They Were Not Slaves. The least they can do is to show rather than tell that these workers mattered and that their lives mattered. And they would show that by, I don't want to say apologizing, because I don't believe in apologies, as I said before, if it's insincere, if it doesn't really come from the heart. But I do believe that apologies alone and saying it was shameful is not enough. It's like insulting, actually, to say, oh, that was so shameful. Oh, I'm so sorry about something so egregious and so enormous and so huge as what was done to these millions of undefended civilians who had done nothing wrong. I don't see a big difference between what happened to these people and what happened to the Jewish people during the Holocaust. The Jewish people were innocent people who had done nothing wrong and who were exterminated and exploited and violated so egregiously by the government at the time. And after this occurred, several governments got together and decided to hold that government accountable for these wrongs, and that was right. That was the right thing to do. Now, it's one thing to say, well, those were the Jewish people, and then these were, a bunch of people who were, non-persons according to the law and according to the custom, and who owned nothing, etc., etc., and they were savages, and we gave them civilization. What more do you want? I don't happen to subscribe to that way of thinking about these millions of individual human beings. No human being is a non-person. It doesn't matter who says that they're not a person. No human being has the authority, the capacity, the ability to tell a living, breathing human being who's like on the planet, you're on the planet, you're not in vitro, you're here, right? That you're not a member of the species. It just isn't a part of the authority or power of anyone, whether monarch, prime minister, parliament, or employer. A cat is a cat, a dog is a dog, an ant is an ant, a bird is a bird, and a person is a person. It's just comme ça, right? So the notion that these were non-persons, and so therefore the governments are not accountable to them the way that they are to the Jewish people or to others is really offensive. Some of these people perished in this experience, whether it was during the trafficking, where they were trafficked from their habitations in Africa, or in Africa, across the Atlantic Ocean. They died, they were killed. Some of them were thrown overboard for different reasons. Or when they got onto those plantations, going from person to non-person itself is a death. I mean, you have to die to yourself. That's like a suicide. You have to like literally kill yourself, who you are, in order to comport and comply with this new definition of who you are. And also, we don't really know what happened to each of these individuals once they were sold like commodities to these human traffickers in North America, whether in the Caribbean or in America itself. People are not always nice, and so of course there was an investment in buying these people to work, and so most of the employers probably would not commit mass murder of their investments. But I'm willing to bet that at least some of these people lost their lives in very egregious circumstances when behind closed doors on these plantations. And so I think that because all of this occurred with the statutory and apparent authority of these governments, these very, very powerful, influential governments in the world today and then, that the least that these governments can do at this point is to accept responsibility and to show some accountability for what has occurred. The notion that this stopped 150 years ago and that was such a long time is offensive. The Constitution is 230 years old. That was a long time. that still is applicable today. It's still relevant. It still resonates. The Magna Carta, which was in force at the time that British subjects went into Africa and trafficked these civilians extrajudicially, was in force, and it's still in force today. Never has it been on hiatus. It has been in force uninterruptedly for 800 plus years. So if the Magna Carta still applies and is still applicable, the notion that 150 years ago is such a long time is just ridiculous. I mean, I am over 50 years old. I mean, I've been on the planet for more than 50 years. Can you imagine, right? I can't imagine. It's like, what? But my father's grandmother, her name was, we called her Granny Sister Lies because her name was, I think, Elizabeth or Eliza. And we, the children, called her Granny Sister Lies. She was my great grandfather, my great grandmother on my father's side. I knew her. I met her. I mean, I'm 50 and she died at 100. She died at 100 when I was about 7 years old. So if she were alive, you're talking about 150 years right there. So you're looking at someone who has touched 150 years. Okay, I have touched this. I went to her house every Sunday after Sunday school, and she would give us candies, and she was lucid as can be at 100. Okay, and she died at 100. Her name was Granny Sister Lies, and I remember her. And I'm, look at me now. I mean, I'm halfway to where she was when she died, when I was 7 years old, or about 7 years old. So that's not a long time ago. But even so, even if we were to agree that it was a long time ago, because I'm old, I don't believe that, and I don't agree. I don't think it's justice. I don't think it's justice to apply the normal statute of limitations rules to these individuals, because this is not a normal case. This is not a normal situation where you have, as a policy, as a government, acknowledged, condoned, policed, legislated, or authorized by your statutes and with your apparent conduct, that these are non-persons. They don't have the right to have rights. They don't have the right to have rights. And you have yet to this day corrected that record. You don't, by law, certainly not just law, you can by corrupt laws, but not by just laws, have the right to raise a statute of limitations defense until it is declaratory determined that these human beings were human beings and persons with the right to have rights, and not only the right to have rights, but that they indeed had rights. The governments of these powerful countries cannot raise a statute of limitations defense against, any subsequent suit that is brought for the justice, of these millions of workers and their relatives. This is my position. So